Hi, this is Deena Thomson, author of Fallen Poppies, and this is Chapter 27.
Chapter 27. Mama! Mara Joy called out merrily at the door. I'm leaving now. Joanna, who was doing her homework with her two younger sisters at the kitchen table, looked up at Mara Joy and wondered why she was so happy lately. It must be because of that boy, Chad. All Mara Joy talked about lately was Chad, Chad, Chad. Joanna shook her head. What on earth did he see in her? Then again, she was always surprised at how her sister seemed to draw people around her. It was like she was a magnet and everyone else metal. For the life of her, she would never understand. She was beautiful, yes, but couldn't anyone see past her looks and into her soul? Couldn't they see how ugly Mara Joy really was? Apparently not. Joanna absently shook her head and dove back into her schoolwork. Another date with Chad, dear? JoBeth asked, walking into the kitchen. Make sure you are home by 10. Your father will be home with Oliver by 10:30, so be on time, or he will have both our hides. You know how he disapproves of you dating this young. JoBeth leaned over and kissed Mara Joy on her rosy cheek. Love you. Me too, Mama. Mara Joy beamed and flushed with excitement. Nothing was going to spoil her mood tonight. She was flying high on life and had no plans to come down. I better go. Chad is waiting. She grinned, pecking JoBeth one more time on the cheek. Don't be late, said JoBeth with a soft and affectionate tone, her eyes glistening with maternal love as she watched her daughter step away from the wooden door. With a spring in her step, Mara Joy nodded in acknowledgement of her mother's words and waved a hand behind her as she descended the patio stairs. The air was warm and gentle against her skin. She couldn't help but feel as if the rustling leaves of the trees were meant just for her as they whispered a tranquil symphony, soft and soothing, throughout the starlit sky. At the bottom of the stairs, a sleek and shiny car awaited her arrival, its doors open in invitation. Without hesitation, she ran towards the car, the anticipation of the evening ahead bubbling up inside her. JoBeth watched her daughter hop in and drive away. She closed the door, slowly feeling worried that maybe Alan was right and it was time to tell Mara Joy to start dating other boys, not just this Chad fellow. What did they know about him anyway? They knew he came from a good family, but that was it. Mara Joy had barely introduced him. If she intended to keep seeing this boy, he would have to be presented appropriately to her parents. She turned to the girls sitting and staring at her from the kitchen table. Joanna was frowning disapprovingly at her once again. JoBeth turned away and went upstairs to get ready for Alan. This would have to wait until later. Joanna went back to her schoolwork, baffled. As much as she tried to get it out of her head, she couldn't recall her mother ever saying she loved her. Hi, babe. Chad's eyes widened as Mara Joy stepped into the vehicle. His mouth curved into a smile. She looked ravishing in her blue dress, which hung gracefully to her knees and sparkled in the warm light of the street lamp. Her dark curls were wild and alive, cascading over her delicate shoulders. A white pearl necklace sank gracefully between her breasts, drawing Chad's eager gaze. He leaned in to kiss Mara Joy on her ruby red lips, but unexpectedly she turned away, leaving him stunned with nothing but a mouthful of her hair. What's wrong? He asked, gripping the steering wheel and looking out the front window. The sky had already turned a bluish black, and stars were beginning to shine dimly through. His mood was good. He had the prettiest girl in town on his arm, and she could barely take her hands off him whenever they were together. The evening they first made love was the beginning of their fiery romance. Every night they were together in the past 2 months ended with them grasping at each other's bodies and inhaling each other's souls. What could possibly be wrong? Drive to the point. We have to talk. Mara Joy said sternly but with confidence, not bothering to look at his stressed face. She smiled to herself, thinking of the secret she was about to share, the news that would get her what she wanted. Chad.
Sure, babe. Anything you say.
He was confused but drove out of the driveway and toward the point, asking no questions. He stopped the car when they reached the clearing nestled in the bushes overlooking the town. He turned to face Mara Joy, who was smiling. Relief began to lift the heavy feeling off his chest. Maybe she wanted to make love again. It would not be the first time she had initiated it.
What did you want to talk about?
He teased, his hand reaching out for her breast. This was more like the Mara Joy he had come to know. First, kiss me, you fiend. She reached out and pulled him to her, kissing him greedily like a starved animal. Chad pulled away, pressing his pulsing lips together.
You had nothing to tell me? You just wanted to come up here for some lovin'?
He smiled wickedly. You do know me. She lowered her eyes and began to unbutton her dress. Chad reached over and helped to release her perky breast. Dark nipples pointed out at him. A deep grumbling noise erupted from his throat. He lowered his head and sucked an erect nipple into his mouth. Mara Joy let out a squeal, holding tightly to his head. She wiggled out of her dress and began to work on Chad's bulging pants. With his pants off, she swung over his throbbing member and mounted him. Chad reached out and grabbed her thighs, rocking her back and forth in heated desire. A half hour later, Chad sat back in his seat, inhaling deep of his cigarette. Beads of sweat rolled down his forehead. Mara Joy was buttoning up her dress, completely satisfied from their quick ordeal. Chad? She asked as she adjusted her dress around her waist. He took a long drag from his cigarette and exhaled a cloud of smoke before turning to face her.
Yeah, babe,
he asked, his voice low and husky. She leaned in and linked her arm with his free one. He felt a rush of contentment wash over him, making him want to sink further into her embrace. Everything felt right as long as he was with her, even if the world fell apart around them. It was as if every inch of his body vibrated with electric energy that only she could ignite. The thought of being anywhere else made his heart ache with longing. I do need to talk to you. She leaned forward so she was situated closer to his face.
About what?
He opened one eye and focused through the twirling smoke. Well, Mara Joy said calmly as she placed her hands on her lap. I want to talk to you about our wedding. She looked immaculate. No one would be able to tell that moment before she had been thrashing against Chad's thighs like an animal in heat.
Our wedding?
Chad sputtered, the smoke from his cigarette burning his throat as he inhaled too quickly. He ran his hands roughly through his disheveled hair, and a sound like a snort escaped his nose as he shook his head and leaned back into the plush leather seat of the car. A wry chuckle bubbled up through his chest, and he closed his eyes. There were times when he thought he loved Mara Joy, or maybe he just desired her. One or the other. He was not ready to marry. He liked what they had. Just thinking about it made him want her again. He opened his eyes. She was staring daggers at him, her face twisted in disbelief. Well, Chad darling, Mara Joy said, screwing up her lips in a matter-of-fact way. I want to get married, and we have to. His eyes flew open, confused. If she thought they had to get married because of what they had done together, she was sadly mistaken. No one had forced her to take her clothes off. In fact, she had been the one to initiate everything in the first place. He lifted his head slowly from its resting place.
What do you mean we have to?
He asked as he sat up straight, looking at her for answers. I am going to have your baby.
What?
Chad choked. He had not been prepared for the words that escaped Mara Joy's lips. He shook his head, trying to erase them from his brain. Collapsing his hands over his ears, he leaned against the steering wheel. It had to be a joke. This couldn't be happening. But it could. They had never been careful. Not once. And they had been together intimately countless times over the last couple of months. What was he going to do? Mara Joy came from a good family. He would be ruined in town. He sat up and looked out the front window into the night sky. He took a deep drag from his nearly burnt-out cigarette and exhaled.
I have heard of these places,
he began, formulating a plan.
where doctors can get it out.
He glanced quickly at Mara Joy out of the corner of his eye. She was staring at him, her lips pursed tightly.
No one would ever know.
A cold sweat broke out on his brow. The car suddenly felt like a small cage slowly crushing him. No, Mara Joy spoke firmly. She continued to look at Chad, her eyes never leaving his crestfallen face. A grin of malice began to slip over her face as she spoke, very composed. I want our child.
No, Mara Joy, I can't get married. I won't.
He shook his head furiously. He remembered his brother saying how some girls would do anything to get a guy to marry them. Why had he not listened to him? He was so stupid to not see this coming. What girl would give herself so freely? He had been an idiot. You will, Mara Joy said, unruffled. Yes, you will marry me, Chad, and we will have our child. No doctor is going to get it out, as you say. Chad looked at her. She seemed so cool, so sure of herself. A chill went up his spine. He was soaked in the image of her sitting there glaring at him, defying him to continue. What did he know of this girl, anyway? What had he gotten himself into? You see, Chad, if you don't marry me, I will be forced to tell everyone you raped me and forced me to keep seeing you or you would kill me. I will say you used me every time we were together, and I was so frightened of you that I kept quiet. Kept quiet, that is, until now. She smiled, pleased with herself. Can you imagine my horror when I discovered I was pregnant with your bastard child? She leaned towards Chad, her lips curled in a menacing snarl. Her curly black hair was billowing out around her face like a dark veil of doom. Poor me, ruined by a monster. People in this town will tear you up for raping and impregnating a 15-year-old virgin. Your reputation will be ruined. Everyone will know you took advantage of a young, vulnerable girl, a daughter of one of the town's most respected families. You'll be destroyed. She made a show of shaking her head in mock sorrow. What a tragedy. She looked deeply into Chad's frightened eyes.
You wouldn't get away with it. No one would believe you.
His future flashed in front of his eyes as Chad stuttered. The person sitting beside him was not the girl he thought he knew. The girl he had held in his arms in the heat of passion had felt warm and inviting. The one in front of him was cold and conniving, an imposter. Oh, wouldn't I? Come on, Chad. I thought you were smarter than this. My father and his friends would believe me. Have you ever met them? They are very protective of me. They would kill anyone who would hurt me, especially someone who defiled their little girl. And that's what you did, Chad. You defiled me. He thought about Mara Joy's towering father and the group of men he was always with, her uncles who held significant status in the town. They were renowned for protecting one another's children like brothers. They would move heaven and earth to see you pay for what you have done to me. Your reputation would be destroyed, ruined, finished. She sat back in her seat and looked out her side of the window, letting her words sink in. The authorities don't take kindly to men who rape 15-year-olds and get them in the mothering way.
You lie,
Chad whispered, slumping his head, his chin resting against his chest. No, I tell the truth. She pivoted in her seat, looking at the collapsed shell of a boy beside her. So, what's it going to be? Your life or marriage to me? Chad's throat tightened as he swallowed. His gaze drifted away from her, settling on the dusty dashboard of his old car. His shoulders sank as he ran slender fingers across the chipped leather of the steering wheel.
It seems you have already decided for me,
he whispered, his eyes unfocused and glazed. That is not true. You always have a choice, Chad. It's just a matter of what is the smart one to make. That, my dear, is for you to decide. Her tone was firm, yet gentle, as she leaned in closer and clasped his chin firmly between her palms. Her elbows dug painfully into his thighs as their eyes locked. I have just laid them out for you. Chad made his choice. They were going to be married, and it would be very soon. He drove her home, not saying a word. Ghostly gray trees whizzed by the window as he tried to grasp how he had gotten into this mess. For all he knew, Mara Joy could be lying about the baby. She didn't seem to have a problem with lying to people. Chad, Mara Joy said, stepping out of the car and straightening the dress he had so easily and willingly pulled off her earlier. Tomorrow we will tell our families about the wedding. She leaned over to kiss him, but he turned his head mutely away from her pursing red lips. You will have to learn that I always get what I want. She rotated away and then swerved back again, as though forgetting something. Her purse thumped like a prison ball against the side of the car. By the way, don't get any ideas about running either. The authorities will find you. My parents will make sure of that. Running away will only prove I was telling the truth. She bent down and blew him a kiss through the window, turned and left, her heels clicking merrily down the path leading to her house. The lights were on, and Chad knew that behind the whitish-gray door, Mara Joy's mother would be waiting, as always. Everything is going as planned, Mara Joy said out loud, happily trying to contain herself from skipping down the pathway. We will be one big, happy family. You will see. She cupped her mouth, hiding the smile stamped across her face, her heels clicking up the front steps and into the house.